and welcome to our show, Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Ferrell, Tata, and I'm delighted to introduce to you Royce Curtin. Royce is with the Norfolk FBI, and he's the special agent in charge. Our issue today is public safety, and our topic is equipping our community with safety practices. So welcome, Royce, and thank you so much for taking time to join us today.
Thank you, and thank you for allowing us to be here and speak with you today.
So your title, you are the special agent in charge. What exactly does a special agent in charge do?
It's a great question, and it's actually a very broad role for us. The people that sit in these roles, there are 56 of us across the United States that each head an FBI field office. And we report directly to the Deputy Director in Washington, D.C. And we are primarily charged with executing FBI operations in our area of responsibility. So for me personally, I'm the special agent in charge of the Hampton Roads area, which obviously goes to the eastern border, up the eastern shore to the Maryland border, out west to the Williamsburg area, and then down to the North Carolina border. So that's my area of responsibility. The roles that a special agent in charge takes on when they report to these positions is really, one, to protect the community from danger across a broad spectrum of threats. And those threats range from terrorism to counterintelligence to cyber crimes to public corruption, civil rights, white-collar crime, transnational criminal enterprises, and significant violent crime. So those types of crimes that impact the citizens in our area of responsibility, my primary role is to ensure that my team has a strategy to identify those threats and interdict them before they can harm the citizens in this area. Another primary responsibility for us in our role is to ensure that we have robust liaison relationships with our federal, state, local law enforcement partners, and the relationships with the community and relationships with our military. So we are most successful in the FBI when we leverage and share our resources and our legal authorities with our partners. And then my last role, really as I see it, is to ensure that my team has the resources that they need to do their job most effectively and efficiently so that we're accountable to deliver value to the taxpaying public.
Wow, that's a big job. How has the function of the FBI changed since 9/11?
So after 9/11, I think it's no mystery that the FBI really shifted its focus towards counterterrorism. That was obviously the largest terrorist event to impact our nation in its history. The FBI, along with a lot of other law enforcement agencies, recognized the need to realign some internal resources to be directed against terroristic type threats, and we did that. And the other thing that happened post 9/11 is the FBI took on and became the lead domestic intelligence agency for the United States of America, and a lot of people don't know that. But the FBI has a law enforcement role, and it also has a dual mission to lead the intelligence collection, assessment, and dissemination efforts for the United States. So it's a very large shift in our responsibility. We still do the traditional criminal crimes that the public would expect us to do, and we talked about those, the violent crimes and the white-collar crimes, and protect people's civil rights. But we also have a significant intelligence mission.
So did the effects of 9/11, did it change our approach to safety in our community, and if so, how?
Well, I think it definitely did. 9/11 was a wake-up call for all of us in America, and I think no one would disagree with that. While individual law enforcement agencies at the federal, state, and local level pre-9/11, everybody worked very hard. They worked hard within their lanes and within their legal authorities. And 9/11 showed us that despite the very best efforts of all the individual law enforcement and military agencies, there was an increased need for those agencies to partner more closely together and share information so that we all have a clear, transparent picture of the threats that impact us across the country. And so as a result of 9/11, that really compelled the United States government and the wider law enforcement community to break down those stovepipe barriers of communication, maybe disparate systems that didn't talk to each other, and clearly define very quickly ways that we could more effectively share information transparently, quickly, so that we could action information that potentially could be threats to our citizens and the public.
And would you say that that's been successful?
I think it's been extremely successful. So post 9/11, We formed hundreds of joint terrorism task forces across the country, and those joint terrorism task forces, as just one example of partnership, are the FBI working very closely with federal, state, and local agencies. For example, our local police departments are on our task forces, Department of Homeland Security entities, Department of Defense entities, and many others who all come together, work collaboratively and jointly in an FBI workspace. We give them clearances. We obviously conduct appropriate background checks, but we give them the same high-level security clearances that we have. They access our classified systems, and they become active investigative members of our terrorism task force. So that allows them not only to understand and enhance the FBI resources against these terroristic type of threats, but it also allows them to go back and brief their chains of command. So, what that really does is facilitate transparent information sharing, which is good for the public.
Absolutely. So does terrorism really affect us here at a local level in Virginia?
I would say terrorism affects every American in this country, to include this area. But when I say that it affects, it's possible, okay? And I'll give you one example. The FBI succeeds along with its partners based on information, and I encourage the public anytime they see anything that they feel might be suspicious to report it to law enforcement, either to their local law enforcement or directly to the FBI. And then for the citizens of Hampton Roads to hold us accountable to vet that information out to determine if there is or is not a threat. That's our responsibility. We are charged with that responsibility to ensure we help keep people safe as part of a larger law enforcement component. And if you think that it can't happen potentially right here in Hampton Roads, I give you one example, Boston, the Boston Marathon bombing.
Right.
So that was an example where two individuals in that local Boston community became self-radicalized through online and through self-study. Then they successfully utilized components from local department stores and things that they bought online to build improvised explosive devices that they successfully deployed amidst thousands of people on the marathon day and amidst thousands of law enforcement and first responders who were there to specifically detect that type of activity. They deployed them and they remotely detonated 2 bombs successfully. So that is a sobering example that, individuals don't have to leave the United States and go overseas and be trained by terrorists and then come back and act here, nor do the terrorists that already exist overseas have to come and penetrate our borders to successfully execute terrorism. Those folks can be homegrown right here. They can be resourced on their own. They can operate in isolation, and they can effectively strike, which is why it's so important that the community understands their role in protecting themselves, which is to see something, say something, and to work with law enforcement.
Can you share any examples of something that's happened locally where you were able to divert a potential terrorist problem?
So, not terrorism, but I'll give you an example of something that happened recently right here in Hampton Roads involving our second priority, which is counterintelligence or espionage, which is somebody trying to take, our secrets or, proprietary technology that's very important to the United States and export that out to a hostile nation. So recently, within the last month, we had an individual who was a former Navy cryptologist who worked on nuclear submarines. He worked in and around information that was very, very important to the United States Navy on one of our very important military assets. And that individual, through investigation, was identified and ultimately convicted of attempting to pass top secret information to whom he believed to be Russian spies. And that individual, lived and worked right here in Hampton Roads. So Hampton Roads is not immune to any of the most significant threats affecting our country. And so the FBI, along with our partners, are very vigilant and keeping an eye out for that. But it really all starts with the community's involvement and letting us know what's going on.
Right, that's great advice. So, and along those lines, how can we keep ourselves safe against threats of terrorism or even fraudulent activity?
I think that'd be a two-pronged response. One is you have to work with law enforcement. Okay, so in order to keep yourself safe, you have to be willing to push information to law enforcement. And two, you have to remain vigilant. Citizens, we're all responsible for being situationally aware of what's going on. The best line of defense are people, our folks know their neighborhoods, they know who their kids go to school with, they know when something's out of place, whether it's a car or a person or it's just some type of activity that they perceive to be strange. And sometimes that instinct, I just would encourage them to follow that instinct, report it, and again, make us responsible for looking into it. Over 90% of the information that's reported to the FBI and local law enforcement often doesn't ultimately result in a significant crime, but regardless, we still go down the same paths and take the same investigative steps to ensure that that information that's reported to us is not a threat against our citizens.
That's very encouraging because you never know. You have to take them all seriously. What do you, in your opinion, what is the most common mistake that the general public makes when it comes to safety?
I think the most common threat that people make is that ultimately, hey, this can't happen here. That type of criminal activity can't impact me right here in Hampton Roads, and I get back to the Boston Marathon bombing as a primary example of it can happen anywhere. The other thing is people, I think there's an inherent human nature to presume that either it can't happen to me individually or that that's just not that big a deal. But I will tell you, unfortunately, Hampton Roads is not immune from crime. And while we have phenomenal law enforcement entities across this region that work very, very closely together to try to keep our people safe, crime still does happen. And the way that we have the most significant impact on crime is to work very closely with our citizens. They give us information, and then they hold us accountable to act on it.
So I know you talk about, you suggested that we stay vigilant as a community, but can you give some specific safety tips that things that we should be looking out for, or things we can do specifically to protect ourselves?
That's a difficult question. Well, let's talk about white-collar crime, for example. A lot of our folks here and across the country are become victims of internet phishing schemes or fraud schemes, and what the first line of defense that people can take to help protect themselves is to make sure that their computer antivirus software is up to date. The second thing people have to understand about that particular type of crime is that they really shouldn't open up emails with attachments from people that they don't specifically know who they're from. A lot of computers get infected by people opening up attachments, and those attachments put malicious software on their computers, and they don't even know it's there. It can stay dormant for years. And that software can do a wide variety of things. It can wait until that individual goes online to do online banking, and it exfiltrates their username and password and sends it off, and they never know it's even been compromised. So that's probably the most specific example I can give you of people being held accountable to keep themselves safe.
So is there a way that you let the community know about like popular scams? Or
There is. So we have an internet complaint site called ic3.gov, which if people have been victimized, they can certainly go on there and put their information in, and they can also learn about scams that are being perpetrated across the country, so they can become self-educated in that way, both as a victim and as a potential consumer of information. We also have outreach programs where the FBI goes out and actually talks to the community on important topics of computer fraud, crimes against children, ways to protect your children from being victimized online. So the FBI has a very robust community outreach specialist, and the next guest, Ms. Vanessa Torres, represents the FBI in that capacity for us here in Norfolk.
Well, Royce, you've given us some great information, and it is a little scary. It's daunting to think of all these things that could be happening right here, but the advice is well received about being vigilant and keeping our eyes open. We've been talking to Royce Curtin with the Norfolk FBI, and we just thank you so much for coming by today, and we look forward to having you again. And we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we will be talking to Vanessa Torres. She is with the Norfolk FBI as well, and is a community outreach specialist. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
You fill up my senses like a night in a forest, like the mountains in springtime, like a sleepy blue ocean. You fill up my senses, come fill me again. Come, let me love you, let me always be with you. Come, let me love you, come love me again.
Welcome back to Joy in Our Town. I'm Ferrell Tata, and we are continuing our conversation with the Norfolk FBI, and I'm so pleased to welcome Vanessa Torres. Vanessa is a community outreach specialist with the FBI. Our issue today is public safety, and our topic is community outreach programs. So welcome to the program, and thank you for joining us.
It's good to be here.
So Vanessa, tell us a little bit about what your position as a community outreach specialist is.
Okay. Well, I manage the community outreach program for the Norfolk FBI, and this is actually a program that has been around since 1988. However, initially it was called a Drug Demand Reduction Program, which is very similar to the DARE program that our children go through in schools today. But after 9/11, as Mr. Curtin mentioned before, the priorities of the FBI changed, and so the community outreach program changed. And so we began focusing more on educational program, not just towards children, but towards adults. So my job is to demystify the FBI and the communities that we serve. And some of the ways that I do that is through programs, educational programs, through seminars, through youth-based initiatives. We're just out in the community on a regular basis talking about the FBI and letting people know what we do, what we don't do, and also letting people meet and greet some of our local agents and professional support staff members.
That's such a great idea, because as he was talking earlier about, we have to be vigilant, and so you're giving us a face of the FBI.
Absolutely, and I really enjoy doing this because one of the biggest myths out there is that the FBI is a lot like TV. And I always like to say, if we're like what you see on TV, I would be a lot taller. So we're definitely not, everything you see on TV is not real. And so what we want to do is let people know that we're here for them, make ourselves available to them so that we can build trust and so that they're not afraid to report crimes to us.
Right. So what is a typical day like for you?
Well, a typical day may involve lunch with a community leader, with a discussion about how we can promote the FBI in his or her organization. We may meet with local school officials. I may be visiting a school, for example, to talk to children about making positive choices. I also do presentations on how to obtain employment in the FBI, and so that involves sometimes a lot of visits to schools and to colleges. So a typical day varies for me. In addition to being the community outreach specialist, I also manage the media program for our office. So a lot of times I'm answering questions from local reporters about local cases, or I'm just answering questions for people in general. Sometimes questions are submitted through our website.
So as you are out and about with the community, are you finding there are a lot of misconceptions about the FBI?
Definitely,
what you do?
definitely. And a lot of people also think that everyone in the FBI carries a gun, for example, or that everyone in the FBI is a special agent. So that always provides me with an opportunity to educate people about the different jobs and the people that work for the FBI. I always let them know we have people that investigate who are the special agents, but we also have people who fix our vehicles. We have people who are secretaries, intelligence analysts, community outreach people. We have human resources individuals. So the FBI consists of a large team of people that work hand in glove with each other. It's not just made up of special agents. And so this is something that I'm discussing quite often as I'm in the community.
So that's actually a really good question. What would you say to somebody who's interested in joining the FBI?
Well, I always tell people you're never too old to be in the FBI. Now, of course, for being a special agent, there's a specific criteria. For example, you have to be between the age of 23 to 37 to be a special agent, and you have to have a bachelor's degree in any field, by the way. It doesn't have to be in criminal justice, along with 2 years of experience. But if you want to be in the FBI, let's say you're above the age of 37 and you want to be in the FBI, you can still be on the professional support staff team, and you can apply for any of the jobs that are open on FBIjobs.gov. And of course, the qualifications vary depending on the job that you're applying for. In some cases, you may need a degree, and in other cases, some background experience will help you. So there is a job in the FBI for everyone, but the main thing is we have to undergo a background check and a polygraph, because we want to make sure that we hire the best individuals, because for you, FBI is Federal Bureau of Investigation, but for us, it's fidelity, bravery, and integrity. And we have very high standards that we adhere to in our office.
That sounds amazing. So can you tell us a little bit about the Aware, Prepare, and Prevent campaign?
Absolutely. The Aware, Prepare, Prevent campaign began in 2012 as an outreach initiative. And it was initially a pilot program that allowed us to go into the community to talk about specific threats. And because the campaign was so successful in 2012, we continued it until now. And what we do is we go to locations. We hold about 6 to 7 APP seminars throughout the Hampton Roads area. And we talk about threats that are impacting our communities today. And we invite people from the general public. It's open to everyone. The seminars are free. And some of the things that we've been discussing this year, as an example, are how to protect yourself from cyber scams. We recently gave a presentation on active shooter and how to respond to the media should a crisis like that occur in your workplace. So we try to talk about topics that are relevant to the communities that we serve. And so if anyone is interested in attending these seminars, they can visit norfolk.fbi.gov and click on the community outreach page and see what the schedule is for the APP seminars.
Now, how does this program work to keep children in our community safe?
Well, through the APP seminars and just through the outreach program in general, I work closely with our agents who investigate crimes against children. And so when they see that certain threats are taking place, they always say, hey, can you give us an opportunity to go out and educate parents? Or can you provide a venue for us at a school so we can talk to school officials about protecting children against cybercrime? Because that is a very big deal for the FBI and, of course, for our communities. And what we do is we teach parents how to protect their children from online predators, how to ensure that children aren't giving out personal information, how to help children understand the threats that exist, because a lot of children think that some of the things that happen will never happen to them, and of course we know that that's not the case. So we provide those types of educational programs throughout the community.
That's the thing, is we always hear about stranger danger, but it sounds now, in today's time, we just have to be so much more aggressive in teaching our children about the scary things out there.
Yes, about the internet. And one of the things that one of our investigators says a lot is that we're no longer dealing with stranger danger. A lot of times these types of crimes against children occur within our inner circle. And so we have to be very careful about who our children are hanging out with, who our children are talking to, not just online, but keeping in mind that we have Xbox and all these different venues where our children are actually talking and communicating with strangers online. So we have to ensure that they're aware of the dangers, and we also have to be vigilant and keep an eye on what they're doing and not just let them be educated through those means.
Do you have data on because I know so many kids, even with the Game Boys and everything, they're constantly communicating with people, other people. Do you have data as far as, is it a small percentage of people that are really out for no good?
Well, I don't have specific statistics today, but I can say that this is a problem that occurs frequently, not just in Hampton Roads, but throughout the nation. And that's why we have the Crimes Against Children program. It's formerly known as the Innocent Images Initiative. And basically, it's the FBI's child pornography prevention program. And this program actually involves other local, state, and federal agencies. So it's not just FBI. We actually have a task force of local, state, and federal partners who work with us to prevent the crime. So that's how prevalent it is.
Gosh, that's so scary. So I know in the news we always are hearing about the Amber Alerts regarding the missing children. That's an active program across state lines. How does that work? Well,
I'm not familiar with the Amber Alert program, but I can say this, that parents who wish to educate their children on different types of threats. This type of education begins at home. As a former homeschooler, I'm a big believer that education and communication begins behind your home. Parents cannot rely on the school system or on the FBI or on the faith-based community to educate their kids. And so in order to prevent these types of Amber Alerts and these types of crimes from happening, it begins with you speaking to your children one-on-one and revealing some of the not so good things that are happening, and just being open and establishing those relationships and letting your kids know it's okay to tell. Because I think kids today have a misconception that telling is snitching. And we don't want to raise our kids to think that. We want to raise our kids to be good citizens, and part of being a good citizen is to let people know that something bad is happening.
That's funny. My own children, when they were small, I used to always tell them, if anyone ever says, "Don't tell your mom," that's tell
a
your
big
mom.
sign. Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about the Citizens Academy?
Yes, the Citizens Academy is one of the most popular programs of the community outreach program for the FBI. And it's a class that we hold every year in our office. In fact, it's held in 56 FBI offices nationwide. And the class lasts for 8 weeks. It's typically held in the spring months. In fact, we're starting our Citizens Academy in 2 weeks. And we're holding it every Wednesday night from 6 to 9 p.m. We've already selected 25 individuals. And during those 8 weeks, we give those people an inside look at the FBI, and we teach them about the many programs that the Norfolk FBI office has, as well as we even teach them how to handle some of the weapons that our agents handle. And it even involves a trip to Washington, D.C. and to Quantico, Virginia, where our agents train. So it's a quite in-depth program, and it allows people to become ambassadors for the FBI.
Well, Vanessa, you've given us some great information, and for people, if they want to contact the FBI to some of these outreach programs that you've mentioned, it is available on your website.
It is available on the website, and we do have a speaker's request form where people can submit their request there as well.
Well, thank you so much for coming by today. We've been talking to Vanessa Torres with the Norfolk FBI. She's the Community Outreach Specialist, and we just thank you so much for your time today on Joy in Our Town. I'm Ann Ferrell Tata.
This program has been sponsored by the Trinity Broadcasting Network and made possible by your telethon dollars. Your continual support can keep Joy in Our Town brought to your home every day. So write Joy in Our Town, P.O. Box A, Santa Ana, California, 92711.